They did it. They did it. They did it. They went ahead and did it. It's done. It's over. Hey, how's it going? Did you see Spider-Man No Way Home this weekend? I hope you did, because it made a lot of money, and a lot of people went to go see it. And today, we're going to be doing a spoiler. I repeat, once again, a spoiler review. Actually, this is going to be more of a talk/discussion, just between myself and I guess you there. Leave your thoughts about the movie down in the comments. I would love to have a discussion with you about the film. Like, leave all your theories, how you reacted during the movie, what were you excited about, where do you think this is going to go. I would love to have a discussion with you about that, because people have been talking about this movie all weekend. Subscribe so you don't miss my reaction to the season finale of Hawkeye, or the series finale, whatever. There's a finale coming up for Hawkeye. We've been doing Hawkeye reactions on the channel, so make sure you don't miss the Hawkeye finale, because it's about to be crazy. Some connections to this movie that we're talking about right now. I don't have a structure. I mean, so much happened, and there has been so much on my mind about this movie. And then I thought to wait a little bit, to let people go see it, and to think about the movie, marinate on it. I've only seen it once. I'm going to go see it again, and probably again, maybe. First major thing that I want to say about this movie is that it is fantastic. It moves at a really, really good pace. I thought Jon Watts and the writers did a great job with this film. I liked some of the shots they did in this movie. There's a lot of great small tracking shots in this movie through apartments. Great visual representations of Tom Holland's Spidey sense. Spidey sense is used more in this movie. And they added like a Tobey Maguire-esque sound effect to it now. He now has a sound effect. Tom Holland Spider-Man now has a sound effect when his Spidey sense starts acting up. I thought Jon Watts did a fantastic job directing this film. And what I love about this film is that, again, it moves at a really, really good pace, and it gives time for everybody to shine. My biggest concern about this movie walking in, I think it's a lot of people's concern walking into this movie, was that this movie was going to be overstuffed with all these characters and all these cameos, and it wasn't going to be coherent, because we all saw Spider-Man 3 and we were all worried that, is this going to work? Well, after watching the movie, I'm going to tell you, fuck yeah, it works. It works like magic. Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland, 5 other villains, and some side characters all fit into this movie really, really well. And what I like is that, again, one of my worries was that these villains were going to like pop in, cause Tom some problems, and then go away for a while. But no, all of them have goals, and there's a reason they're in the story. They're not there just for fan service. Although this movie does have fan service, it's fan service with a purpose. Every single appearance in this movie has a purpose. Every villain has a purpose to be here. Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man, they have a reason to be in this movie. And what I really like is that Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are in this movie for a large portion of it. They are supporting characters. They're not just cameos. It's not like 2 other Spider-Men showed up in the 3rd act in the final battle to like save him or to help Tom Holland. No, they're in the movie for a large portion of it. And a large portion of it is just Peter Parker's hanging out, which I really, really loved. If we're going to bring 3 Spider-Men in, we're going to make it satisfying for the audience. They're going to hang out. They're going to do cool action sequences. They're going to be on screen for a while together. It's not going to be throwaways. It's going to be satisfying for the audience to watch this. And it's going to leave them with a memory that they'll never forget. The thing about the first 2 Tom Holland movies is that their tone is more lighthearted. It's more funny kind of in a way. Like, they're very funny movies, but it's missing some stakes. It's missing like a seriousness to it. But this movie's tone is very serious and actually at times very dark. The trailers did not sell that this movie was going to be dark. And I gotta say, I absolutely love that. This movie is where they are now starting to mature, and by the end of the movie where they completely mature Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Because in this movie, this Peter Parker is put through it, man. He gets destroyed and beaten down, mainly by the Green Goblin, and then has to learn to build himself back up, to learn to once again learn to be Spider-Man, but in like a new way. This movie is very serious and dark in tone, and I absolutely love that because it's now something different from the first two movies. It's changing the game. It's doing something different. And this movie for me personally has my favorite Tom Holland performance as Spider-Man. Not to say that this movie is dark the entire time. It still keeps that same comedy that the first two had, between Peter, Ned, and MJ. It still keeps that tone going, but it's a bit less of that and a bit more of that new kind of dark, serious tone that I just talked about. And I just love that. And this is why this movie is my favorite out of the three movies that Tom Holland has done so far as Spider-Man. 2 more Spider-Men. We have three Spider-Men in this movie. It happened. All those rumors, all those leaks, all the times Andrew Garfield went on interviews and said, no, I'm not in the movie. I'm not the werewolf. Everybody thinks I'm the werewolf, but bro, I'm not the werewolf. Actually, let's start talking about the villains. Let's start off one by one. So we have Doc Ock. And Doc Ock, Alfred Molina comes back as Doc Ock. And the way he says it, he's like, I was there in the final battle. I was choking Spider-Man with his claw. And then he was like, and then I ended up here. So his mind is a little bit all over the place because I guess in that reality where he just left, Peter didn't get to change his mind yet into becoming a good guy. So he's still like a little bit evil, trying to fight Peter Parker. And then, what's great about Doc Ock is that he's never actually evil, he is, but he has a whole corruption with his arms and everything. And then there's a whole mission where they're going to try to cure all the bad guys because the bad guys go back to their realities. They end up dying. And Peter doesn't want that on his consciousness. He wants to save them all, and he thinks he can cure them all. He feels like this is his responsibility to save them, so he's going to try to cure them. And the way they cure Doc Ock, they build him a new chip, they put it in there, and there was a great scene with him in the apartment where he's like, it's so quiet. Like, I've never thought that, I would be just hearing myself in my head. Because the arms, as soon as the arms took over back in Spider-Man 2, there has been a mental battle within his brain between the AI that's trying to control his mind and himself, and that chip that they put in just calmed him down for a second. And Doc Ock basically did the same thing that he did in Spider-Man 2. He was evil for just a little bit in this movie. Then he kind of got on board with the mission, and then once they fixed him, he switched to the good side, which logically makes sense, because Doc Ock was never actually evil. He was just controlled by the AI. So if you fix the AI, he'll come help you and come help you save the day. Yeah, Alfred Molina was great. And then, actually, the two villains that were probably the most forgettable ones were Sandman and the Lizard. The Lizard probably being the most forgettable of them all. The Lizard was just kind of there. He didn't really have a purpose or any type of goal. The Sandman was a little bit more interesting, but this is, again, just like the problem that I had with Sandman in Spider-Man 3. There's stuff there about his character that's kind of interesting, but he doesn't get to shine above everything else. He's not as interesting as everything else, so he just kind of gets lost in the mix. His whole thing was that he came to this reality, and he was like, yo, I just want to go back and see my daughter. He's like, okay, I get that I'm in a different reality right now, but can we just press this button, and can you just send me home? While Peter's like, no, hold on. Let's wait here a little bit. I'll fix you all. And Sandman is not really with it. He's like, yo, just send me home, right now. And then at a certain point, he switches into fighting the three Spider-Men, which I guess just leads into an action sequence for him to fight. But I thought the whole idea where he's just kind of there, and he's just like, I can't be bothered with any of this, just send me home, made complete sense, and it was just kind of interesting the way his character worked. But then at a certain point, he just kind of turns, really evil and tries to fight the Spider-Man. And then it kind of just lost me there. And then they fixed him and sent him home. By the way, Thomas Hayden Church, I think, only returned in the voice aspect because Sandman was animated the entire movie. I heard that there were scheduling conflicts that didn't allow him to be in this movie in his actual Flint Marko form. Although once Tobey Maguire fixes him, there is a shot of him as Flint Marko. But actually, now that people point it out and I think about it and I rewatched that scene, it's kind of obvious that he was just basically plucked out of Spider-Man 3. The scenes were plucked out of Spider-Man 3 and put into this movie where he's like kind of, where he loses his hand powers and he's looking at himself. And me watching Spider-Man 3 recently, I was like, oh yeah, no, he's not actually there. That's exactly from Spider-Man 3 that you just took and moved. Also, the actor for the Lizard was kind of the same thing. He wasn't able to shoot, but he returned in voice. So I guess they still got to be part of this movie, in voice at least. And then we're moving on to Jamie Foxx's Electro, who got a big redemption in this movie for what he was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, here's the thing that I'm going to point out with him in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, for me at least. There was something interesting with him in the beginning, you know, the whole obsession with Spider-Man, and him being at a very low point in his life, and him seeing Spider-Man as like a hero, but nobody in his own life respects him, and he wants the kind of respect that Spider-Man gets around New York City, right? I thought there was something really there, and in the beginning of the movie, every single time I watched that movie, I remember thinking, I kind of feel bad about this guy, right? Everybody walks over him, but he's looking up to this hero, and then, you know, it all kind of goes downhill from there once he gets his electro powers and turns blue and stuff like that. He's not blue in this movie. Jamie Foxx looks dripped out in this film. He looks great. I love the costume designs. They added a little arc reactor at a certain point in this movie. You know what's great about Jamie Foxx's Electro? Well, first of all, what's great is the way it works. He gets moved to this reality, or he gets moved to the MCU, right? And he's feeling, because he is Electro, he's feeling all this type of energy, which makes sense. We're in 2023, we have all this new tech, we have all this Stark tech, you know what I mean, magic, all of that. So he's just kind of feeling the energy of the MCU, basically. And he's like, I like this reality. Yeah, I'm gonna stay here, and I'm gonna get more power. And also, because I look different now, I look great. I don't look blue, or I don't look the way I looked like before I fell into the bath of eels. So it makes sense that he starts to feel all of this, and he's like, yeah, I'm staying. And Jamie Foxx is a great actor, and I thought he was great in this film. But there is a small detail that a TikTok pointed out to me. I've been on TikTok this whole weekend, and people have been talking about this movie. And this one TikToker pointed out this great detail that completely changes the way you look at Max Dillon, Electro, the way you look at him in this movie, and especially the way you look at him in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So there's a great scene between where Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man gets to talk to Max Dillon. And Max goes, you know, you're young, you live in Queens, you help poor people. I just thought you were going to be black. And it's a scene that had a lot of us kind of chuckling in the theater and being like, oh my god, it's like an Easter egg. And he does go on to say, you know, there's got to be a black Spider-Man somewhere out there, nodding to Miles. And that's kind of how we all react, like, oh, maybe. But this one TikTok account pointed out something very interesting about that scene. That line makes you think now, wait, so when he saw Spider-Man, he thought behind the mask was somebody that looked like him. Representation. He saw representation in Spider-Man. And I don't think this TikTok that pointed this out to me is reaching at all. I think it makes complete sense and adds so much more depth to his character and to his obsession about Spider-Man that he saw. I mean, he didn't know who was behind the mask, but he thought that somebody who was behind the mask was somebody that looked like him and looked up to him, looked up to Spider-Man. So his obsession in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, now combined with the line that he gives to Andrew in this movie, that adds so much more depth to his character, and I absolutely love that detail. It could have been used just like as a joke line to like nod you to Miles Morales, but I think that like it just adds more to his obsession in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So now when you go to rewatch The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with this knowledge, you could feel a little bit more for the character and understand his obsession a little bit more. Now let's talk about my favorite villain and the best villain in this movie. And that is Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, Norman Osborn. Oh my god! Willem Dafoe brought it in this film, and he did not mess around at all. First of all, I never really had like a big thing with Green Goblin in the first movie having a mask, you know, covering Willem Dafoe's face. It never really was like a big thing with me. I know the internet always pointed it out, but watching this movie and watching Willem Dafoe's face and his facial expressions, I'm like, Yeah, you should have taken that mask off a long time ago in Spider-Man 1. We should have got rid of that a long time ago because you are a great actor. Holy shit, I'm scared of you. Willem Dafoe and the Green Goblin bring it in this movie. I mean, first of all, the fight scenes between him and Tom Holland Spider-Man are brutal. Just brutal. Violence. I'm talking violence. Bro, when they're in that apartment complex and he picks up Peter and he just bombs him through like 4 different stories. Oof. And then Peter like does like a move where he like swings him to the top and then flips and then kicks him down through a bunch of other floors. They were going at it to kill each other. Also, 66-year-old Willem Dafoe insisted on doing his own action sequences. There's a great interview with him where he goes, yeah, when they pitched me this thing, even before a script, I talked to the producer, I talked to the director, and I told him, hey, like, I'll return, but I want to do the action because that's the fun part of it. And you can tell that he cares. He put in work for this movie. He was like, he himself said it, I don't want it to just be a cameo. I don't want to just show up and be a cameo. I want to do the work. And I think us as fans really have to appreciate that from him and from everybody else in the movie. They all could have just came, showed up, got their paycheck, be like, all right, I'll be here for a little bit of screen time. But no, all of them have a significant amount of time in the film. All of them feel like actual characters, and all the actors put in work because I think they all realized we're doing something special here, and this is going to be in the history books, and I want to be part of history, and they all brought it. I see a lot of people online talking right now about how they were like, oh my god, how is he more menacing than he was in Spider-Man 1? Easy. I rewatched Spider-Man 1 the other day. There's a movie commentary on the channel if you want to watch that. But Spider-Man 1, because it's an early superhero movie, it's in the early 2000s, it's a little bit corny at times. Willem Dafoe gives a great performance. There's a lot of scary scenes there with him. But his Green Goblin, he's wearing a suit, he's got the helmet on, and, his face is always covered. So it's a little bit corny at times. But this movie, he just goes ham with it. He is scary a lot of the times. There's sometimes where he's Norman Osborn, like when he's talking to Peter and he's like, hey, like, if you ever need a job and you want to commute across dimensions, like, you can come work at Oscorp. So there was a great scene like that where I thought, yeah, we should cure Norman Osborn. And then he turns into a Green Goblin and that smile comes out and he just picks up Peter and he goes, let's go, Peter. Boom! And also, I guess since I'm on the topic of this, the Green Goblin ends up killing Aunt May, and Marissa Tomei gives a fantastic dying performance. Also, not before Aunt May gets to deliver the iconic, Uncle Ben speech, but now it's an Aunt May speech. She finally gets to tell Tom Holland's Peter finally gets to hear that with great power comes great responsibility. Aunt May's death was one of the scenes in the movie where I was sitting at the edge of my seat fighting back tears. It was one of those scenes. Great performance by Marissa Tomei, great performance by Tom Holland. And while I'm on the topic of Aunt May, it's great that they decided to switch it up. They gave Aunt May that line, with great power comes great responsibility. And a lot of people online have pointed out that with that line, I think what Marvel did here that was very interesting, and considering the fact where this movie ends, is that this whole trilogy, this Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home trilogy, was actually Tom Holland's Spider-Man origin story. Was this Home trilogy his actual origin story into becoming Spider-Man? And again, I like that they switched it up. They gave Aunt May that line because Aunt May, Marissa Tomei's Aunt May, has been such a big part of this Peter's life. And one other thing I found interesting is that they have almost completely ignored Tom Holland's Uncle Ben. It's almost like Uncle Ben or his Uncle Ben doesn't exist. I know there has been like little Easter eggs or little references with like his suitcase or the suit that he wore to like prom in Homecoming, or to Homecoming in Homecoming. What am I talking about? Prom. And I didn't need him to be there, or for Tom Holland Spider-Man to say, hey, like, I remember when Uncle Ben said that or something like that. But there was a moment where the other two Spider-Men, great scene by the way, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland Spider-Man has hit his low point. By the way, visually beautiful scene, one of my favorite scenes where he's standing and watching the big-ass Jumbotron, and J. Jonah Jameson, who was also great. J.K. Simmons came back. He was great. He played a great part in the movie. He wasn't in it a lot, but when he was used very effectively. And that one scene where it's in the rain and Peter is so down right now, and it's a great visual where he's watching that screen talk about the accident that just happened. And the other two Spider-Man come and they're like, hey, like, Uncle Ben taught us this. So he never mentions, Tom Spider-Man never really acknowledges that he has an Uncle Ben or he had an Uncle Ben. And then there was that scene at the end at the graveyard, right? I really thought that when he was looking at Aunt May's grave, I really thought it was going to like pan over or reveal that she was buried next to Uncle Ben. But even that, I could have just used that, you know, she was buried right next to Uncle Ben. We kind of acknowledged Uncle Ben in this franchise. I don't need them to acknowledge Uncle Ben. I just find it interesting that they have completely chose not to. Not even in the, like, burying them side by side. I thought that would have made sense. Let's talk about the two other Spider-Men joining Tom Holland Spider-Man in this movie. Bro, when Ned opens the first portal, I saw it immediately. I saw the suit in the darkness, the silhouette. I saw it immediately. And the entire theater erupted, because not only is it Andrew Garfield coming through, which is great, yes, he's back and he's fantastic, we're gonna get to him in a second, but I think people also realize that, oh my god, if he's here, that means next up is Tobey. And next up was Tobey. Tobey wasn't wearing his suit was under his youth pastor clothing, like Andrew Garfield said, but man, when they both show up, the entire thing just boom. So good. And what's with it? With the MCU using Doctor Strange's portals to make such great entrances. I mean, the two most iconic scenes in the MCU is the first portal scene in Endgame, and now this. And both of them, what they have in common is Doctor Strange's portals are bringing somebody through. But guys, do you know how great it was? I mean, I'm sure you guys know how great it was because you experienced it yourself. But for me, watching Andrew and Tobey and Tom do anything together, man, when they were just hanging out in the lab together, I couldn't believe it. I was sitting there with the biggest smile on my face. Them just talking, not even doing Spidey action. Just three Peter Parkers hanging out. Because Peter Parker is the personality. That is the guy in the suit. That's the guy that you get attached to. When he puts on the mask and the costume and he's Spider-Man, that's the action type. But the personality is Peter Parker. So watching the three Peter Parkers interact was such joy, man. I had like tears of joy in my eyes. I had to clear my eyes because I was just so happy. I couldn't believe it. For days, I couldn't believe it. After I saw the movie too, I'd be sitting here at home just doing nothing and thinking about the movie and being like, I can't believe they fucking did it. I can't actually believe they fucking did it. They pulled it off. Everything from when they're up on that rooftop with him and they're giving him that with great power comes great responsibility type speech again. And they tell him that they know it too and they know the responsibilities of Spider-Man and how they understand what he's going through because they went through the same thing. Wonderful. When they're in the science lab working together trying to make up the cures. Wonderful. When they're on top of the roof making fun of Tobey Maguire's organic webbing. Wonderful. When freaking, oh my god, when all three of them are like, hey, like, how do we work as a team together? And Tom's like, I was in the Avengers. And it's funny to me, it's like blowing my mind right now that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man said the word Avengers. He was like, oh, the Avengers? That's great. What is that? I'm like, Tobey Maguire just said Avengers. Shot of them three running off that platform and then swinging all together. There's also a move where I think it's Andrew Spider-Man who like swings both of them and like swings them around. They do like a team swing move. Fucking amazing. And they all three land all fucking stylish and cool. And oh my god, the scene. Okay, fine. Let's talk about Andrew Garfield real quick. Because Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 3 specifically have been trending all over Twitter and all over the internet for the past weekend after he made his appearance in No Way Home. Now here's the thing, personally I was always a big fan of Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. His movies are not the best, but he is a fantastic Peter Parker / Spider-Man. He's great. And that is because Andrew Garfield is a fantastic actor. Out of the three Spider-Men, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield is the best actor. And his resume says it. I mean, have you seen The Social Network? And it shows when he shows up in this movie, because the guy is just leaking charisma. He low-key stole the movie. I mean, it's great. Tobey Maguire's here. It's my childhood. Oh my god, he's here. And he's great also. And all three of them working together is fantastic. But Andrew Garfield, just because he is the best actor out of the three of them, man, the dude almost stole the show, his Spider-Man. And that led to a lot of people switching their opinions on his Spider-Man and being like, hey, can we have The Amazing Spider-Man 3 now, please? Which I think now that people saw all three of them in a movie together and saw Andrew Garfield outside The Amazing Spider-Man series, I think people have now realized that the problem with those movies were never him, it was his movies. When people are like, hey, who's your favorite Spider-Man? And then somebody goes, Andrew Garfield. People in the past tended to freak out and be like, Andrew Garfield, really? That's because people did not know how to differentiate between him, Spider-Man, between which one's the best Spider-Man and which one has the best movies. Because he is great, but his movies around him are not so much. Although I do like The Amazing Spider-Man, the first one. The second one is okay. And apparently Sony and Marvel are planning to do something about it. Or maybe there's talks about bringing him back and doing projects with him. Which I think is really interesting because DC has all these Batman projects going on simultaneously right now. And nobody knows which one's the main Batman or what's going on. Like Michael Keaton, Robert Pattinson, Ben Affleck. They're all going at the same time right now. And, you know, they're just doing their thing. They're like Robert Pattinson's Batman movies are not connected to anything. He's just being Batman. So listen. If Sony's doing this whole Sonyverse thing with Tom Hardy's Venom and Morbius, and they need a Spider-Man, just take Andrew Garfield. Just bring him back. And Sony can have a Spider-Man, and Tom Holland can build the MCU, and we can have two Spider-Man going at the same time. I see no problem with that. Just do it. Oh man, and that scene where MJ falls and Tom Holland jumps after her, but the Green Goblin takes him out and Andrew jumps in to save her. Redemption, man. So good. And I was so surprised that so many people were just so happy because I was in the theater and I'm sitting here so happy. I'm like, oh my god, yes, he's gonna save her. And everybody else around me also got what's happening, that this is a redemption for Gwen Stacy, and he catches her and everybody's cheering him on. As a long-time Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man fan, I was just so happy, honestly, to be like, wow, you motherfuckers, you're all acknowledging him finally. Yes, I'm so happy you guys are all cheering for his success now. Also, Tobey gets a few good interactions with his villain, specifically Doc Ock, where he lands and they just have a little discussion where Dr. Octavius looks at him and he goes, Peter, my boy, you've grown up so much. How are you? And he's like, yeah, trying to do better, which is a line from Spider-Man 2 that I didn't realize until the internet pointed that out to me. That's one of those obscure references that I didn't catch. But great that they added it in the movie. It was a great little interaction between them that put a smile on my face. They also did do kind of a psych out there. It did scare me. My heart dropped for a second when Tobey got stabbed. I was like, oh, no, you're not going to kill him. You're not going to bring him in and kill him here. No, thankfully it was played for a joke. They didn't actually kill him. But I'm going to be honest with you, that was better than any jump scare I've ever seen in a horror movie. My heart dropped for a second when he got stabbed. I mean, what can I say? You saw the movie, the three of them interacting. It was just something else. It was something like I've never seen before. And I had the biggest smile on my face. And every single time I think about it, I have the biggest smile on my face. It literally brings me joy. It brings me so much joy that they did it. Bro, when they're standing there and Tom gives all three of them a hug and it's just three Spider-Men just all hugging, and for me it's like my childhood, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, now Tom Holland, and man. I just realized I didn't even get to the ending of the movie. This video might be long as hell, but this movie has so much going on in it, and I just want to talk about pretty much everything, and I'm sorry that it's a long video. I hope you stuck around just to geek out with me about this. But the ending of the movie, So this entire movie has been very dark and serious, and I love that about it. And this entire movie has been kind of just shaping up Tom Holland's Peter Parker into a more classic Spider-Man in terms of the fact of his responsibilities. And him and Doctor Strange there at the end agree that the best thing for this universe, because the universe is breaking and all these bad guys are coming through, and Peter takes responsibility for his actions, and he decides, you know what? How about, instead of forgetting Spider-Man, make everybody forget about Peter Parker, and then none of them will come through. And that is such a sacrifice on Peter's behalf. I mean, he has nobody left at the end of this movie. Nobody knows about him. Nobody knows about Peter Parker. Not Happy, not MJ, not Ned. He has nobody. He's on his own, which is great, first of all, for the future of his stories. But it was heartbreaking. He makes that decision. And I haven't spoken about Doctor Strange in this movie so far, but Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, he's always great. He was great in this movie. He did his part in the beginning, then they benched him for a little bit, understandably. And he came back and he finished it off very strongly. I see Doctor Strange as the future leader of the Avengers. So him and Spider-Man kind of talking there at the end, and him being like, nice knowing you, Peter Parker. Like, we did some great things together. Nice knowing you, buddy. That's like basically Tom Holland Spider-Man almost saying goodbye to the MCU. Like, I think he's talking to a future leader of the Avengers, and they're kind of saying their goodbyes, and just to think about the adventures that they've been on in Infinity War and Endgame and what have you not. It's a big decision for Peter to make. Everybody forget about him, and the goodbyes between him and MJ and Ned. I haven't talked about them either. They were also fantastic. Zendaya was great. I think she got more to do in this movie, and their relationship works better in this movie than it did in Far From Home. Like, I cared about it more, mainly because the stakes were higher, but both of them, Tom Holland and Zendaya, they're dating in real life, so their chemistry is off the charts, but their relationship just works better in this movie, and I care about them more. So when that ending comes and they're basically breaking up and he's like, you're going to forget about me, it's heartbreaking. For me personally, what was more heartbreaking, though, is seeing him and Ned do that handshake for, like, the last time. Yeah, him and NJ have been together since the end of Far From Home, but Ned was always there. Ned was the guy in the chair. Ned was the guy who has a little bit of magic in his family. Brought the other two Spider-Men in here. And, seeing them do that handshake at the end there and just them kind of breaking off from him, it's heartbreaking. And he made the big decision there at the end where he came to the coffee shop and he thought that maybe I could talk to them a little bit. But he realized that me being here puts them in danger. And it's such a Spider-Man thing to do, to see your loved one, to see your girlfriend, your MJ, and then be like, I can't be with you because it's going to put you in danger. Like, that's such Spider-Man. That's such Peter Parker. And I love that. What does that mean for Ned and MJ in the future? I have no idea. I think they're done with them. I think they're probably going to move Peter Parker onto maybe a Gwen Stacy and a Harry Osborn. I just think it seals their fate that they're going to Boston and he's staying in New York City and they're not staying together. So, and there's all these other characters, like I'm talking about Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn that we haven't seen yet. So he could get new friends, new girlfriends everywhere. So we're potentially done with this MJ and Ned, which is sad. They were here for the entire trilogy, and they were his best friends and girlfriends, and it was a sad goodbye. Me personally, again, I absolutely love that ending. I mean, like I said, that Peter Parker Spider-Man, that classic decision, can't be with my MJ because she's gonna be in trouble. Also, he becomes this broke guy who gets his crappy New York City apartment, sews his own suit together, the classic red and blue suit, more like inspired by Andrew Garfield Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and some from like the comics. It's more like a classic suit. That looked great, him in the snow and swinging and everything. And right there, I think all of us realized that, wow, he's all grown up now. He is Spider-Man. He is the classic Spider-Man. And I love the decision, whoever made the decision, to start to pull him away from the MCU, to start to pull him away from the Stark tech and everything. He doesn't need that anymore. He can now go on these classic Spider-Man adventures that we are so used to. We had this great run of him being in the MCU and him dealing with Stark Tech all the time and Happy being there and all of this MCU stuff and all this MCU tone. But now we're just kind of pulling him out and we're sending him to college, and nobody in the MCU knows about him. So, I mean, they know of Spider-Man, but they don't know of Peter Parker. So it creates it creates a very interesting future that me and I think everybody else is really excited to see now. Let's talk about that post-credit scene real quick, because the post-credit scene is basically kind of picks up right after the post-credit scene in Venom Let There Be Carnage, which the post-credit scene of that movie is probably the best part about that movie. And if you haven't seen that movie, the post-credit scene is basically Eddie is chilling on his bed, he's talking to Venom in his head, and then all of a sudden he gets teleported. And he gets teleported to the MCU. All of a sudden he's seeing the TV, and they're talking about Tom Holland Spider-Man. It's shocking, right? And it's like, oh my god, where are they going to go next? Tom Hardy's Venom is in the MCU now. Well, not exactly. This post-credit scene is him. He's in Mexico. He's talking to Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso. Shout out to all my Ted Lasso fans. Great show. He's talking to him about this universe, and he's like, so there's like an Iron Man and whatever, and he's like, oh, I should go to New York and talk to Spider-Man. And then all of a sudden, he's gone. He gets teleported back out. It's one of those things where, again, you go back to the parameters of the spell, and you think about, why did this Eddie Brock, Venom, why did he get teleported to the MCU if in his universe there is no Spider-Man? Maybe there's a Peter Parker, but as far as we know, there's never a Spider-Man in the Venom universe, the Tom Hardy one. So how does he know Peter Parker or Venom, and why does he get teleported? I mean, the only reason he gets teleported is because once he gets teleported out, he can leave a little bit of the symbiote. So maybe the next Spider-Man movie is a Venom storyline, because a little bit of the symbiote got left in the MCU, but Tom Hardy's gone. Amy Pascal of Sony has already talked about that they are already working on a Venom 3, so it's already kind of going. I guess maybe the story writing's going, and he's not in the MCU. Is he in the Morbius? I don't know where the Morbius universe takes place. I don't know which Spider-Man is there. Maybe it's Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Maybe Andrew Garfield will be taking on Morbius and Venom. Tom Hardy's Venom, that is. But Tom Hardy's Venom is kind of like silly. I don't see him as a villain. He's doing this whole anti-hero thing also, Lethal Protector. Is he really like a villain? I just don't see it. I was about to wrap this video up, but then I realized, forgot to talk about this somehow. Matt Murdock, Daredevil, played by Charlie Cox, returns. Well, we know that Kingpin is making his appearance in Hawkeye, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, who played Kingpin in the Netflix shows, and Charlie Cox returns as Daredevil, Matthew Murdock, in Spider-Man No Way Home. And I was so happy that so many people in my theater knew who he was. I wasn't the only one cheering. Everybody else started cheering also as soon as that cane came into frame and they did that pan and you see it's Charlie Cox's Daredevil. Man, when he catches that brick and he goes, I'm a really good lawyer. It's a very quick cameo, but that's all I needed. It's all I needed. As a big Daredevil fan who's been asking for the show to come back, that's all I needed. To see him and to know that something is in the works and that I'm gonna see Charlie Cox's Daredevil again, that something is going to happen in the future and that the show is not completely dead. I guess talking about my favorite Matthew Murdock Daredevil, that wraps up my discussion or geek out over Spider-Man No Way Home. This movie basically delivered on every single front. It's the best Spider-Man movie ever made in my opinion. I think it's the best MCU movie ever made. Right now, I think that, I'm thinking that right now, after the first viewing, after one viewing, I'm thinking, this is probably the best MCU movie ever made. Who knows, opinions change, maybe in the future my opinion will change, but right now, I'm still riding the high of this film, and I'm still thinking that it's so good. What do you think about No Way Home? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Did you sit through this whole discussion? If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you left this video a like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Check out some of my other videos. Last week I did a movie commentary for Spider-Man 1 from 2002 and Spider-Man 3 from 2007. I also have a Spider-Man 2 movie commentary on the channel. I just didn't do that last week. I did it a few months ago. So all 3 Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, movie commentaries, are out on the channel. Again, let me know down in the comments what you thought about No Way Home. Leave all your theories, everything you were excited about, every single thought about this movie that you have. Leave that down in the comments. I would love to have a discussion with you about that. Make sure you leave a like once again and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.